Alrighty, so hello everyone. It's absolutely great to be here today. And also a huge thank you to Serverless Days for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all. I'm here to bring you the story on how I absolutely slayed big data with serverless functions. But first things first, it's really nice to meet you all. I'm Yas. I'm currently an undergraduate computer science student at Ulster University here in Belfast, and this time next year, I'll be weeks away from graduation. I'm a software engineer with just over a year's experience working as a part of a research and development software team at Hamilton Robson. And then my favorite one that I can never quite find the right title for, it changes anytime someone asks me. I'm just an absolute advocate for all things tech. My intentions overall are just to empower more women to break into the sector, especially those who may have been dismissed due to their past educational backgrounds, and just overall be the representation that I wish I had when I was growing up. And for some of you who do not know who Hamilton Robson are, we're a technology company specialising in software services and immersive AV experiences, working with clients like X, Reddit, Salesforce, and also Warner Brothers has provided us with a really inspiring mix of unique creative and also enterprise projects. I joined their team almost 2 years ago now, working with them during the summer of 2023, just for an internship, and then I'm back again currently for my full year placement. But today, I want to share my journey through a project I worked on at Hamilton Robson known as Beacon IQ. Beacon IQ is deployed across 4 continents, or it's supposed to. Oh, use the clicker. Oh, sorry, we're obviously having technical difficulties. Perfect. So Beacon IQ is deployed across 4 continents, 7 time zones. Oh, and per day, on average, generates 2.3 million data requests. Oh, just need to sync up with this here. Meaning that in just 1 month, Beacon IQ generates around 70 million IoT requests. And that's enough for every single person in Belfast to send and receive a tweet every 7 minutes, 24 hours a day for the entire month. And now that we know just how much data Beacon IQ generates on average, I just want to go over how our meeting data is collected for the analytics dashboard. So a meeting booth, which is installed in our clients' offices, will have a sensor and an occupancy light installed, and this is fitted by our installer team. And then just to give you a very high overview of our state machine, as it's definitely a whole talk in itself, each time someone uses the booth, these raw events are collected and then stored in DynamoDB. And when a meeting has been detected in our meeting pairs Lambda service, we then store this processed data in our meetings table. This collected meeting data is then used to provide statistical insights for our clients' offices across the whole office, on each floor within that office, and then also for each individual booth. But this has now changed. So let's rewind to late last year. Our client came to us with what sounded like a very simple request at the time. They wanted the ability to no longer display the last 5 working days across the dashboard data. They wanted to see all 6 months all at once. And we thought, great, this is going to give them so much more insight. And we ourselves were quite eager to see what 6 months of data would look like on some of our dashboard components. And we were overall really excited to get stuck in. So we got QA set up just to replicate the scale of our client's largest office, as we really just wanted to put QA to the test here with the largest data set possible. We then requested the dashboard to fetch the 6 months of data. And that's when the problems started. In hindsight, it was quite optimistic for us to think we could go from the 5 working days right up to 6 months all at once, without making a couple of changes at this point, but still optimistic as ever. We thought, hey, let's try a few different date ranges and just really test our limits and see what we can get here. And in the end, all we could get was 2 weeks. We were obviously feeling a bit defeated at this point, as fetching these larger data sets really opened our eyes to how our dashboard was really just no longer scalable. It wasn't going to do what we needed it to do, and was very likely to fail on us sooner rather than later. And it also showed us that any increase, like anywhere in our client's largest data set, for example, if in an office we had more BIFs installed, our biggest office has 160 BIFs. If that doubled, and even actually recently there are another 50 to 60 BIFs going in there, that 1 working week was not going to be enough to get us through. And then let's look into why there was no room for us to scale. So firstly, we were recalculating all of these statistics each time someone requested them, which was slow and resource intensive. This was okay for our smaller data set, but then when we started requesting these larger date ranges, the dashboard just got slower at displaying them as it had a lot more to calculate. We were also repeatedly recalculating historic data that never changes, which is just a waste of computing time. Just an example being that if a meeting occurred last Friday, this meeting is just not going to change. It'll still be there. So each time someone was visiting the dashboard, we were recalculating those same stats. And then lastly, pushing all this complex logic onto the client really just made our dashboard fragile. This approach worked to get something out quick, and it did serve us well in those early days when Beacon IQ was just in beta. It was before we were sort of getting things out there. We just really wanted to have the dashboard, have the data on it. But our recent issues with the real-time client-side calculations really strengthened the fact for us that there was no room to scale. And it was finally time to refactor our front end, as it no longer needed to understand or process this raw data. So we went back to the drawing board, and we just wanted to figure out how we can make our dashboard more scalable, so it wouldn't only just work for the last 5 working days of data, but we could also fetch those 6 months. We wanted to refactor our logic to just also ensure in the future that good foundations were set with any increase in our data set. So this kicked off some discussions amongst the team, and we just started to research a few different methods. And of course, just had a nosy at how other teams were handling this, what they were getting onto, and just any individuals out there who were suffering the same problem as us at the time. And we were really struggling to find a solution, in all honesty. First up, we did try compression. It did allow us to go from that whopping 2 weeks to 1 month. And yeah, even though it did that, it just wasn't the full fix for what we needed. Pagination was also something we looked into, and this would be great down the line. But with the way we were fetching the data at the time, our calculations really relied on that full data set to get some of our high-level stats, so we just couldn't do that yet. And our research really just led to quite a few dead ends, no real answer. But after a few more spikes, and then us just going through whiteboarding sessions, meeting up, being like, what can we do? How can we tackle this problem? I just remember turning around and saying, what if we just processed our stats day by day, and then once we have what we need, we can just store them in DynamoDB and fetch them from there. And then that's when our feature started to come to life. So now that we decided to take the approach of pre-calculating these stats for our dashboard, we just had to start breaking down every calculation that was made, getting stuck into our first few tickets and all that stuff. But first up for me, a schema needed to be defined. Never made a schema before, but looked into it, got a lot of feedback, and the first real big thing that we needed before we could dive into this was just to have another session to really detail every piece of data that we were calculating and then displaying on the dashboard. And in the end, we detailed that there are around 20 calculations that happen to our meeting data to get what we need for each of our dashboard components, and this has actually since increased as well. These range from quite simple to complex, such as just total floor usage across an entire, or total floor usage for each floor across the office. Or if you look at the bottom here, you can see there's like slots here. They just represent 15 minutes for a booth. We were calculating each of those slots as we were fetching this data. And now that we knew all the calculations we needed, we had to work out how our DynamoDB tables were going to look. And after the first few drafts and just many schemas, we finally came to these 3 global tables that were created to support the dashboard by storing our stats for each stat type. And then just to break these down for you on a very high level, the office stats stores daily stats across an entire office's usage. And then when you go into the floor stats, it'll just be each floor within that office, those day-by-day stats. And then at the end here, we also store metrics on each individual booth within those offices as well. Each table is also globally replicated for low latency access across all of our deployed regions, and it leverages a variety of data types such as lists, booleans, numbers, and strings, and many more. And in this example, just the top image represents what 1 day of pre-calculated floor usage looks like. This is stored in DynamoDB as a list. And then at the bottom here, we just have the last 5 working days displayed in our dashboard heat map component. And now that we had these tables set up, we knew what we needed to calculate. It was time to migrate these real-time client-side calculations to a new scheduled Lambda service. And this is where the Calculate Stats service was born. It's an AWS Lambda function that processes all of our raw meeting data and then generates those daily stats for the dashboard and is triggered just by EventBridge. And then just to give you a very high-level breakdown on the flow of this, for one office, EventBridge will just trigger our Lambda, and then our Calculate Stats service begins. It goes, it fetches the meetings for the last hour, returns all those meetings that we need, just performs a check to see if there are any meetings that have occurred within the last hour. If not, its execution will end there. But if we do have some meetings, it's going to go through all our sub-services here just to calculate the stats for each stat types and then store them in each of the DynamoDB tables, and then the execution will end there. And this approach has just centralized and automated our calculations process, just ensuring that the stats that we needed, that we were continuously calculating, are now just readily available for us to use. And now that we had all these calculations that we needed stored into our new tables, we needed endpoints to fetch them. And as a part of this update, we added these 3 new AWS Lambda functions that process and serve data to our dashboard, just leveraging our custom API. And then just again, to give you another very high-level overview on the flow of this, a request is made from one of our Beacon IQ endpoints, just depending on what data has been requested from the dashboard. And then the corresponding Lambda or Lambdas will just begin their execution. Our data is then queried and fetched from Dynamo, And then there's just a few final calculations that we need to perform that we can't work out day by day, such as if you're looking at the last 5 days, there'll be totals for that, or averages, sorry, so percentages, because you can't get a percentage of a percentage and it'll be accurate. So we just really wanted to get the actual total usage percentage and those values on the fetch, and then we return that response, and then that's when our execution ends. And of course, while I was working away on our back end, one of our other engineers was just completing work on the front end, as all of these new changes needed to have our dashboard updated to be able to fetch, render, and then just also cache these new stats that were coming in, which was done just by one of our engineers, Bradley. Again, this is a whole talk in itself, and one that I won't be able to dive into today. But once both of our work came together, we could just finally display the 6 months on the dashboard in QA. Again, just before we wanted to go to production or anything else, there's a lot of data validation and testing, as our data set was huge and still is huge. That came with us just ensuring that everything that we were displaying on the dashboard is valid and that all our calculations were returning exactly what we expected. We have our automated unit tests, which are just our main verification source for ensuring that our data was being correctly processed. And then each service has its own dedicated tests that use mock data just to check the flow of our calculations and that everything's correct and valid and that they're just returning and all passing and everything looks good. And then in addition to unit tests, session-based testing, end-to-end testing, and everything else in between was performed just to validate the full workflow and data integrity of this new feature across our entire system. And once we were happy with our testing and our results were looking good, it was time to hit the big red button and deploy to production. And yeah, thankfully, when we made the switch, it was actually not that bad. All the fires were kind of prior. So I'll take this one win that when we did that, it thankfully worked. But of course, with anything, there were a few bugs and they popped up here and there. It was quite unfortunate, but you deal with that in software anyway, and those have since been patched up. And I really do feel like the lack of major issues here just came from the ability to actually set up our serverless backend in production and historically calculate all the stats that we needed and just get everything prepared and ready in the background while our current application was still running. And then as well, another amazing thing that I absolutely love are Amplify preview builds. So when you're going to go to production, you can put it in a PR and you can actually just see what everything's going to look like on the dashboard before you fully commit to it, which is great. And then here it is. Well, a very high-level overview of it again. I just created this architecture diagram showing this new feature and how it flows with our existing architecture in the EU only. And our full architecture diagram is an absolute beast. If I tried to put the screenshot in here, you wouldn't even be able to see it. There's just so much going on. So I just represented things like our state machine, other global tables. We have other scheduled services. Yeah, again, just a whole beast of services to make Beacon IQ run. But yes, for this region, I just wanted to highlight just a few of our pre-existing pieces and then how they fit in with the feature and how that all integrated with the Beacon IQ system. And after this, a lot of really cool metrics came from it. There was loads I would have loved to go through today, but I just really wanted to highlight the decrease in initial dashboard load times. Just looking at our clients' largest data set again, that was where we always just went back to. We wanted to make sure we were testing with the biggest data set possible and also give our comparisons with it too. 1 week of data initially, on that initial load on cache, took 7 seconds to come in before the update. And we now get this in about under a second. And then I know before that we couldn't fully load in the 6 months, but just based off of 2 weeks taking about 20 seconds, 25 seconds. This came down to 2 seconds. And then as well, if we look at 6 months, if we were able to load that in, it would have took about 6 minutes. In all honesty, it would have just been the worst thing ever. But we can get our clients' largest data set fetched into the dashboard in just around, 12 seconds. 12 seconds. And now that we split the data we need for the dashboard into 3 separate requests, we just wanted to introduce some of these things that we were thinking about in the past into our sort of future plans, goals, what's the next steps here. So yes, pagination was talking about it earlier, saying it wasn't great at the implementation we had before to actually dive into it at that level. Now that we did split up all of our fetches and we were fetching the booths, the floors, and the offices separately, we do have this component. It is our booth data table. As you can see, just shows 10 at once, but for our largest office, we are bringing in all 160 booths at once when we do make that initial request, which for the 6 months, again, could really bring down those times if we just paginated and just allowed users to click through and fetch what they needed as they were looking at this table. And then modular components for loading as well is just something that we don't have. We would really like to introduce a non-modular approach now that we are fetching all those stats separately. So what did I learn from this? I learned quite a lot. So it was quite difficult to find the 4 sort of keywords to really go through this. But yes, a lot about architecture. I got so much exposure to multiple AWS services just through designing those schemas and then setting up all our infra as code, using CloudFormation to set those up, and then just implementing this new serverless backend feature using AWS Lambda, API Gateway, EventBridge, and many more. And then collaboration was also another main point here, as I got to just collaborate with another engineer on this project, dive into existing code bases, just all that fun stuff that's really good to get at this level of experience, while I'm still in uni, because I know when I go off and graduate and get my job and all that there'll be a lot of collaboration, a lot of jumping into code bases that are already pre-existing. So just getting this experience over a good couple of months, long-running project was really good for me. And then ownership is another word here too. It was just being trusted to actually take on this feature really helped my confidence and just proved to me that I can manage larger long-term responsibilities. And it was just really nice to see something from start to end and actually get to see how all of our services work together, as before I was usually maybe just picking up a ticket, working with one service or setting something up. So yeah, just really built my confidence in overall just architecture and also with AWS services. And then debugging as well. So before I would spend a lot of time trying to debug very simple fixes, or the ones that just really annoy you almost, you're looking at something and you're like, why is this not working? What's going on? I couldn't comprehend error codes or anything like that. But with larger features, they really do surface deeper bugs. And these deeper bugs just really had to get me to put my problem solving and debugging hat on many occasions. And then lastly, so I was talking about debugging there, but what I wanted to highlight about that was why I was reading that line was just that it was a huge skill upgrade in my eyes. I really emphasize about this point. I feel like I just get through things a little bit quicker these days. Don't get me wrong, there's still some things I'm like, what is this? And that'll just be happening for the rest of my engineering career. But it's nice to see something and be like, I know why that's happening and then where to go and look and connecting the dots almost. So yeah, just before we do wrap up here, I wanted to highlight that prior to this update, I always thought that success came from perfectionism and getting things right and finding the perfect answer and just in all honesty, the ability to master something. And I spent so much time chasing these perfect answers when it came to engineering software. And I only really started to figure out through this feature that the real lesson is never actually in finding these perfect answers, and that the real growth just happens in the process, not after success. And with all of that being said, if anyone would like to chat to me at all, this QR code takes you to my LinkedIn. I think I have LinkedIn, X, everything on there. If you message me on X, I might not see it, so I really apologize. LinkedIn is definitely the better source here for me. And yeah, just feel free to reach out to me at absolutely any time. I'm always up for a chat, or yeah, just come and get me at any point today. And if you miss me, always send me a message. I'm usually about and all that there. But yes, thank you so much.